Hello out there. My name is Laolu Akonde, and you are on to Inside Sources. Today I'm going to be skipping my take because I'm having two major segments. The first one, we're going to be looking at the issue of the reforms in the power sector and how is it that states are keying into the new opportunity to regulate electricity, and of course the challenges in that sector with the apologies of the Minister for Power recently. And then the second segment is going to be a panel discussion that will look at some of the dynamics that is happening between INEC and the parties in the preparation for 2027. Inside Sources will be right back. Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today I'm leading the show with a conversation around the issue of electricity and power and energy in our country. I'm sure you know that a lot of things have happened lately in that sector. And to join me in that important conversation today, I have Dr. Nnaemeka Eweluka. You will recall that he was formerly the managing director and the CEO of NBET, that is the Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company. And currently, he is the executive commissioner of the Anambra State Electricity Regulation Commission. He's in charge of market regulation and competition. I'd like to welcome Dr. Eweluka back to Inside Sources. My brother, it's good to see you again in Abuja.
Nice to see you again, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be here again.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much for coming. Since this is your first time in the studio, I'm going to kick off with my, custom question: that what do you think about the future of our country? Do you think that we are on course to that great country that many of us believe is the destiny of Nigeria?
Speaking generally about the country, that is beyond the power sector, which of course is my core area.
Yeah.
The country has a bright future. But just pretty much like any other organization that has a bright future, a bright future does not make itself. The bright future, whether for a family, whether for a company, whether for a country, it's still the summation of the decisions of different parties within that arrangement. And so ultimately, you hope that all the decisions that make up the future of a country, that all those decisions are taken in the national interest, and that when that is done, of course, there's a bright future for the country. Same for the family. Right. A family, whether a family has a bright future, ultimately it's about the decisions taken by the father and the mother, and at some point the children, and how they live together. So, right. I'm quite optimistic about the future of a country, but I also know that it's not self-executing. It still requires a lot of work, right. Intentionality, right. In trending in the right direction.
Okay, all right, thank you. It's always good to get that perspective to start with. And so, like you said, we're going to focus on the energy and electricity sector, which is where you have expertise. I mean, you had joined NBET and eventually became the CEO. As a matter of fact, you are also a lawyer, and I know that you're also actually a law teacher at some point in the UK.
Yes.
Now, you're back in the country now, and you're working with, this idea of making states to take charge of electricity. How is that going? Before we start to talk about Anambra, how is that opportunity that states now have to regulate electricity in their own states, unlike what it used to be when it was only federal government? How is it shaping out? It's now about 2.5 years after the law was changed.
Thank you very much for the question. First of all, an increasing number of states have started that journey of setting up their different regulatory frameworks. And I still firmly think that it's a step in the right direction. It was a good decision, a good early decision taken by the current administration, of course, with the president signing the Electricity Act back in 2023. So, like I mentioned, even when we had this discussion last, when you have one central regulator of electricity, there's a limit to how the regulator can have impact at the grassroots. And so when you have multiple regulatory bodies, especially in a country like Nigeria, where we are still not where we ought to be in terms of electricity, it allows different states to chart different courses. Some states will get it right, some may not get it right. But what you have is that there are multiple, if you will, experiments happening at different, in different parts of a country. And for those that do get it right, and I believe that Anambra State will be one of those that get it right, it now provides something for others to kind of learn from, which is why it's also good that even at the state level, there's a forum of state regulators, right, where there's a lot of knowledge sharing. And if you look at a place like even Anambra State Electricity Regulatory Commission, where you have commissioners that have functioned at the federal level. And so one of the advantages is that you've had, if you look at it from, say, privatization, you've had over a decade of looking back to see what has worked, what hasn't worked. And then at the state level, you're able to kind of fine-tune things in a way that you believe can work better because you have the benefit of experience. So I think it's a step in the right direction. Not that I believe that all the states will get it right. Getting it right is a function of a whole lot of things. There's a political will part of it in terms of how the state itself views electricity sector, electricity market, electricity regulation. There's that political angle, but there's also the part about having the right mix of regulators that are appointed to superintend the development at the state level. Then there's the issue around the types of regulations you make, and whether you have the right sort of regulations that actually solve the problem of attracting investors to the market and also improving the welfare of the customers in the market. Okay.
I mean, so I understand. I had a guest last week. He's a member of the 11-member Presidential Committee on Grid Asset Management Complaint that is being set up, and he said that you still have about 15 states that haven't even done anything about the opportunity that states now have, as a matter of fact, the powers that states now have. So that was why I wanted to know that, and I'm going to shape the question in a different way now, that how quickly do you think the people in the states, at least those over 20 states that are making moves, how quickly do you think it will happen? For instance, how quickly will it happen in Anambra State that this new law can actually be something that people can benefit from by the sheer fact that now they have better electricity supply?
If I'll speak specifically for Anambra State, first of all, there are 5 commissioners. I'm one of the 5, and one of us, the chairman of the commission, is Professor Frank Okafor, who, of course, used to be a commissioner in charge of engineering at the NERC.
Okay.
Very knowledgeable, very experienced in the sector.
So you have at least 2 of you
who have
federal experience.
No, not just 2 of us. Actually, we have a good mix. So he's, like I say, former commissioner at NERC.
Right.
The commissioner legal in ASEC used to be GM legal at NERC.
Oh, wow.
And then the commissioner in charge of, the commissioner legal is Barrister Chijokobi.
Okay.
Then the engineer Nwokoye, who is a commissioner in charge of engineering, as well as the vice chairman of the Anambra State Electricity Regulatory Commission. Engineer Nwokoye used to be GM transmission at TCN.
Oh, okay.
And then finally, Engineer Nosike. Engineer Nosike used to be a director at Ministry of Power, and subsequently acting permanent secretary at Ministry of Power.
So Anambra just got the cream of the...
So we do have a good mix, a good leadership team, and there's political will on the part of the governor, who is keen to open up the space. His vision is to have 24/7 electricity in Anambra State, and we are keyed into that vision. And we're looking to see how we can take concrete steps towards achieving that vision within 3 to 5 years of our presence in Anambra State.
And you guys have been around for 1 year?
We've been around since October 9 last year.
So it's not up to a year.
So it's not up to a year, roughly 6 months. But generally, so far, so good. We've started rolling out our regulations. And so I'm optimistic about Anambra. But to the point you raised about the fact that many states have not yet kind of stepped into that space. Like I mentioned earlier, it could be for a number of reasons. It could be that they have not yet found those that can man the commission. That could be a possibility. It could also be that, keep in mind that ultimately the focus of the state, if you really want to have a thriving state electricity market, you need to look at the entire value chain, from fuel to generation to transmission to distribution and then customers. So some states like Anambra can domicile all that whole value chain within the state. But some states may not be able to domicile all that within the state.
Interesting.
Maybe they don't have fuel source. Okay, that may be the problem. And so even if they set up all the structures, you may find out that they are so tied to the apron strings of the federal system because either power comes from outside of the state or fuel comes from outside of the state. And as long as you're not regulating the entire thing, then you will have that weak link that you can't control.
Interesting. But you said that Anambra is controlling all the ecosystem essentially for this.
So Anambra has everything it takes to actually.
So where do you get your fuel or your?
A good question. So Anambra, of course, the Anambra Basin has a rich deposit of gas. Okay, and there's significant gas deposit in Anambra State as we speak.
Interesting.
And so that is something that a number of players are kind of looking at how that can be harnessed.
Interesting.
There are those that are already playing within that space within the state, and so the gas is there. Of course, one can always bring in some renewables, even if irradiation is highest in the north, but it's really sunny in pretty much a good chunk of the country. It may have to be more of how the sort of technology you use in making sure you get the maximum out of sunlight. But solar plus battery is very viable in Anambra.
What about hydro?
Hydro as well. We're looking at hydro potential because there are studies that have been conducted, of course, showing that even Anambra State may have some hydro potentials. Of course, for hydro, I'm talking about mini hydro particularly. The key thing is that you need water that, as much as possible, has some kind of waterfall. Where you have that natural force of water
energy,
that can, generate that energy. So we're looking at hydro, we're looking at gas, we're looking at renewables.
Interesting.
But we're quite optimistic about what we can achieve, as a commission, especially when you have a good crop of experienced people under the leadership of someone that has also functioned as a commissioner at NERC, who has also seen kind of at the federal level from that regulatory point of view. So it's a good mix.
It is, certainly. I mean, it seems that Anambra has just captured some of the best to do the job. But in your interaction, you said that, so the states that are into this, I understand about 20 of them, that you guys do some information sharing and stuff like that. What are the challenges that people talk about, with this new law? What are the challenges?
You're talking about the Electricity Act 2020.
Yeah, and so we have about 20 states that are doing it. You said that maybe in another 3 years or so, this thing will be working, because right now we don't know when this is going to be real. So I wanted to get an idea of what may be the major challenges that they have to deal with. Those who have stepped up.
Yeah, so for the different states that are kind of stepping into that space, the challenges, of course, cannot be uniform. For some states, their own issue may be they don't have fuel, or they don't have a generating, like Anambra currently doesn't have any grid-connected generating plant. A state that already has a grid-connected generating plant in the state probably has an advantage, because they may kind of be thinking around, okay, if power generation to the grid has its own constraints, is there a way we can have a commercial discussion with the generator that is right there in the state to instead of injecting the power into 132, 330 kV, can that power be instead injected into 33 or 11 kV
for commercial
for local distribution within the state, particularly if Gencos are struggling with getting paid. Okay, so is there any way that power can be rechanneled and to serve local industries? So
which would be a mutual advantage to the Gencos and
which works for everybody.
For everybody,
for the Genco that's already connected to the grid, it serves as a de-risking mechanism. If you can have drop some of that power locally within your state. So the point I'm making is that different states have different issues that will be kind of constraining them from being able to effectively man their state or man their station effectively. It could be anything. It could be, for some states, they may have their political issues in terms of how the regulatory body relates with the executive. For some other states, it may be around funding. Depending on whether the state is able to provide sufficient funds for the regulatory body to kind of start functioning. For some, it may be that not all the states don't have the same mix of commercial and domestic customers. A state with a lot of commercial customers may be better able to move the tariff in a way that you'll struggle with if you're dealing with primarily domestic power consumers.
Right.
So different states have their different issues, but the Forum of State Regulators provides that ability to cross-fertilize ideas, have somebody you can bounce ideas off. If you're trying to try something out, can find out whether they're already working on it and kind of learn along the way.
Okay, interesting, very exciting conversation. Last question, because of our time. The Minister for Power, recently, a few days ago, had to come out to make a national apology, because of the, I think currently in the last few days, where you've been in Abuja yourself, I'm sure you must have experienced this. The outage has been quite significant, and of course we've had these occasions of the grid collapsing over and over again. You have worked in that sector. You are still in that sector for a long time. You've been around. What do you think is the solution to the problem, especially of the collapse of the grid? And again, I've asked you this question before, but I'll ask you again. What is that thing that comes close to the silver bullet? I know it doesn't exist. But what should we do at the federal level that we are not doing yet, to solve this problem of supply of power?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would say that there are structural issues that can be addressed. For instance, the Minister for Power is not Minister for Energy. He's Minister for Power. Okay? And so that already, when you have a country where about 60-70% of the power is gas-based, and the Minister for Power is not in charge of gas, then you already see that on a structural level, there's a problem. Okay? Because it means that if the minister has gas-related issues,
he has to go
to another minister. Okay? And then it all depends on the relationship between the two ministers, etc. So
it's the same government.
And then again, you have different regulators. NERC sets the national tariff, but NERC, a critical component of national tariff, is the gas that fits into that tariff.
And NERC
is not the gas regulator. So NERC has to.
Who is the gas regulator? That would be
NMDPRA. So, and again, different regulatory bodies may have their different goals that they are pursuing, and different ministers may have their different KPIs. And so, what that may speak to, it's what it is. But what it may speak to is the need to kind of look at how to achieve better coordination. Back in 12 years back, when more than 12 years ago, when because I worked with the Presidential Task Force on Power.
Yeah, I remember.
Back then, you had the presidential PTFP reporting to a higher body,
That's the Presidential Task Force Committee.
Yes, Presidential Task Force on Power, headed by then Professor Batanaji, who later became Minister of Power.
Mm-hmm.
But reporting to the PACP, Presidential Action Committee on Power. PACP was chaired by the president himself. And PACP used to meet every 2 weeks. So and all the critical ministers, as far as power was concerned, would be in the PACP. So if the Honorable Minister of Power comes and says, I'm having gas issues, right? The president calls the GMD and NPC, what is going on here? GMD and NPC says, well, this and that and that and that and that. Okay,
and the president says,
report back in 2 weeks, okay? And so in 2 weeks' time, he has to think about the fact that in 2 weeks' time, I'm going to face the president again, you know. And so when you have that sort of overarching entity chaired by at the highest level, there's no hiding place. You can't hide. You can get away with excuses for maybe 1 or 2 or 3 meetings. Beyond that, it will be clear that you're clogging the wheel.
Yeah.
Okay, so that sort of overarching governance, I think, is critically needed. Secondly, I also think that even at the operational level, you know, when I was still in NBET, the board of directors of NBET approved for NBET to be transitioned into what would be an energy exchange, an energy trading platform, basically a facilitator of transactions, but not a counterparty to PPAs. And so what the vision was that Gencos will start to deal directly with DISCOs. Okay, and I see that as the future. We need to have integrated utilities. We've seen the Shiroro, North South Power, acquiring EcoDisco. We need more of such transactions. Because what it means, and of course, Transcorp is already involved in Abuja Disco. Okay. When you have integrated utilities, it provides for end-to-end planning.
Yeah, more seamless operation.
As a Genco is thinking about ramping up its generation,
they're also thinking.
They're already thinking about
who's going to buy
this power. So that needs to start as soon as yesterday. You know, it's so critical. And so in that instance, what you would have is that NBET now becomes an energy trading platform that facilitates these sorts of transactions. You know, and
not necessarily being the conduit.
Not necessarily being
Do you then think that it was an error to the way the whole power sector was dimensioned, to have generation here and then transmission and then distribution? You know, do you think that was an error?
No, it wasn't an error. Every reform has to start somehow. Okay, I don't think that in itself was an error.
Well, at least now you are advocating for integration between generation and distribution.
The thing with reforms is that there's no reform that is cast in stone. Okay, and so anytime you're implementing a reform, you're kind of tracking how this reform is working. A situation where, I mean, I applaud the federal government for the measures that have been taken so far towards issuing bonds that will be used in deferring paying Genco obligations. But even as you're thinking about that, you're thinking about the fact that there is still underpayment going on a monthly basis. And so it's somewhat like you're patching holes on a boat, but there are still some new holes opening up in the same boat.
And the boat is still in operation.
Exactly. And so even if you run 5,000 miles on a treadmill, you're still kind of in the same location. And so the issue now is, how do we get off that treadmill and actually start running? It's not like there's no effort. If you see a man running on a treadmill, he's sweating. There's a lot of work, going on there. But there's no motion. We need motion. And that motion requires, I believe, 2 complementary reforms. Number one is, like I said, perhaps a tighter governance on the public side, where all the critical players that have one function to the other, the Honorable Minister of Power gets the blame, but he's not the one responsible for gas. You know, he cannot, in this thing, you can't come out and say it's not my fault. No, it's a leadership thing to be able to step in and say, hey, I'm the one. Put the blame on me. But of course, back on the back end, you know that you're not really kind of the one holding all the critical cards.
Levers.
On the private side, there's need for that combination. You see, if a Genco sells power directly to a disco and a disco doesn't pay, what do you think will happen?
Well, I guess the accountability will be much easier to deal with.
Yeah, because so we've had these sort of era of banks taking over discos.
Right.
But that had an issue. The problem with that is that banks are not in the business of running discos.
No.
So any bank that has taken over a disco, yes, you have the asset, but fundamentally you're not you're not a power person, okay? So you're looking at, how do I quickly get back my money? I need my money quickly, okay? What low-hanging fruit do we pluck? So it's not sustainable. But if a Genco that is owed takes over a disco, first of all, that Genco is not looking for a quick fix.
Yeah.
It's not just about how do I get back my money. No, I still have power to sell.
Yeah.
And I still have a lot of generation that needs to come on.
And these disco people,
they
have access to the customer.
Yeah. So I need to make this thing work. And I'm already in the power space, and I already understand this business. I can actually work something out and get this thing to work. North South Power has taken a step in the right direction. Transcorp has also taken a step in the right direction in terms of Abuja. More needs to happen. Similar transactions.
Interesting. Thank you so much, Dr. Namika Iweluka. I'm very delighted that you are still in the sector, because it seems to me that the solutions are there, even if they're going to take a while to be fixed. And it seems that, we may be going in the right direction. I think the president should consider actually having a minister of energy. That might help, just like you've also referred to, that might help in advancing this thing quicker. And I think that was what he was going to do before, when they were talking about, Malam El-Rufai joining the cabinet, but all of that did not happen.
It will be very helpful to have a minister of energy. There are two critical agreements that every generation company needs to sign. The PPA for selling the power, the GSA for buying the gas. Okay? When you have the PPA and the GSA domiciled within the same industry, within the same ministry, sort of, or being overseen by the same regulator.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Being overseen by, so if you have an energy regulator that has visibility of both the PPA and the GSA, okay, the energy regulator has
and the PPA is power purchase agreement, gas supply agreement. GSA is
GSA. Gas sale agreement or gas sale and supply agreement.
Right.
So when you have those two critical agreements being approved by the same regulator, it will go a long way.
Okay.
Because the approving authority understands the challenges on both sides.
And I think this is what is already working in the state, in Anambra state. You're not going to have that dichotomy.
Well, it's part of what we are looking at in terms of recommendations.
Okay.
Of course, when you step into a regulatory space, there's no way that is perfect. Your job is to ensure that, number one, achieve what you can in terms of regulation, but there may be some things that are beyond regulation, and that's why a regulator is not just an entity that makes regulations. One critical function of every regulatory body, which I'm hoping that even at the state level, that they step into that space, is policy advisory.
Okay. Thank you for coming to Inside Sources. And like I said, I'm happy that you are still in the sector.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Now, that's the segment. Inside Sources will be right back with another segment. Don't go away. Welcome back to Inside Sources. In this concluding segment, I want to have a quick conversation on issues and development around 2027 with the parties and INEC and all of that. To join me in that important conversation, I have returning to Inside Sources, the strategist, policy advisor, and the group CEO of GITC, Malam Baba Yusuf. Malam, good to see you again.
Always a pleasure to be here, Prof.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Of course, also returning to Inside Sources, we have Mr. Femi Odere, a public affairs analyst and a notable APC chieftain. Mr. Odere, welcome to Inside Sources again.
Thanks for having me, Laulu.
All right. Yeah. Let's start from, the sort of pushback from IPAC. As you know, IPAC is the group where all the political parties come together to define common interests. They had a meeting earlier this week with INEC chairman where they were talking about the guidelines for 2027, and they seem to be saying that, look, the time that you've given us to register members electronically seems to be short. There's also the issue of, before that time, the issue of primaries, that, the delegate is out. It's either direct primary or consensus. And we've seen quite a bit of, drama across party about that. So, Madam Baba, to start with you, how do you read, some of these developments?
Very interesting times. Nigerian politics, interestingly, just like every other country, pre-election year is very exciting. The spice added to the Nigerian context is
spice,
this new
spices.
The spices, that's true. This new, if you like, spices in the electoral, act, and the manual that has been rolled out by INEC based on that, and the cry out by the opposition political parties and other opposition figures that they believe this will hamstrung them. Indeed, it may highly likely do that. Personally, first of all, my feedback on the methodology of emergence of candidates is what I think shouldn't be. The Supreme Court was very clear. It is tried in law in Nigeria by virtue of the declaration and the judgment of the Supreme Court that party politics, whatever they do is a party affair. Now, the emergence of candidates of political party is basically a party affair. So I believe it is not okay to remove the indirect primaries. It's like now imposing on political parties choices, what they should do. That shouldn't be the case. I'm a proponent that we should not handcuff political parties, even though they are victims of their own making. Their lack of internal politics is enough for them. So personally, I believe removal of that indirect primary is against, one of the highest decisions of one of the highest and the highest court of the land, Supreme Court. And of course, it's also antithetical to the fundamental human rights of individuals and a group of people. Beyond that, also, yes, some of these provisos will hoodwink them, like the registration and all that. But my take on that is this. I've been saying this since 1 year ago, Prof. The opposition politics in Nigeria is at its lowest ebb.
Yeah, very lame.
Lazy politics is what I call it. Politics of what I call entitled arrogance. I've never seen it before, not in Nigeria, not anywhere, that the elites that have decided to be, or that have happened to find themselves, they didn't decide to be in opposition. Gone were the days of Pa'au, of Malam Aminu Kano, of Chief Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe, of Malam Balarabe Musa.
Yeah, and then the man in Gongola, used to be Gongola, Waziri.
Mahmoud Waziri, my boss in APP.
Yeah.
These were opposition figures that decided to play politics that way. No apologies. They were ready to pay their dues. And in the region fast, whether you like President Bola Ahmed Tinubu or not, paid his dues in the opposition.
Really?
Now, we know that at any point in time in the political history of politicians, they will end up in opposition. Democratic Party, Republican Party in United States of America, Labour or Conservative or Lib Dem, whatever, everywhere in the world. Here we are in Nigeria, we have some entitled politicians across Nigeria, north, south, east, west, that believe that power is their entitlement. So they never prepared to be in opposition.
Interesting point.
As far as I'm concerned. And then when it happened, how it happened, one, they were sucker punched by reality. Second, they are still living in the intoxication of entitlement mentality. Now that they are now waiting for Nigerians like us to ensure that what will make them win election is what happens. And that is why they are crying now.
Good place to land. Let's take it to Mr. Femi Oderia. I mean, of course, we know that, that you're a member of the APC, but I wanted to ask you that even in APC, We've had quite a few instances, particularly in Rivers State, Mr. Fubara Dagogo, who wanted to run in some of the congresses. I think it's a zonal position, and he didn't get the opportunity to even get a nomination form. We saw the video that was trending with quite a bit of altercation. And then one of the officials of the APC convention has come out to say that, look, we're going to pick the leaders, the party leaders, through consensus. So even in APC, there's quite a bit of tension. So how do you see that kind of development? So the leaders are saying we do consensus. Some members are saying, I want to run. What happened to my right to run?
Yes, Laulu, once again, thanks for inviting me. But before I answer this particular question that you posed, which if I must answer it, I would say that all politics is local. And what that means is that you cannot really divorce tension and friction in a political organization that has people of different tendencies and different values and different interests and all of that. So the issue in Rivers State is really not and should not be peculiar to Rivers State in terms of all these consensus and all of that, because at the end of the day, they have to sort themselves out. Because don't let us forget the fact that Rivers State has been in the news for whatever it's worth because of the tendencies that are so entrenched. You have the wicked tendency, you have the governor tendency, and of course that is going to play out.
And then there's even the original APC tendency.
And the original APC, so that is going to play out no matter what. But at the end of the day, I know very sure that they are going to find a way out of all of that. But I have to come back to Malam Baba in terms of what he said concerning the issue of consensus and no consensus and all of that. I agree with you to a very considerable extent. But my point of departure with you, Malam Baba, is when you say that the consensus arrangement or the indirect primaries should be jettisoned and they should not be jettisoned, rather. But you see, we've had our democracy now since 1999. And if you agree with me that we have always been complaining that the democracy that we have is more or less static. It is still with a very small d. It doesn't really advance the interests of the generalities of the Nigerian people. And there's a consensus when it comes to how far entrenched, if you will, our democracy has been. But you see, you also agree with me that it is an obvious fact that the indirect primaries does not really represent the wishes of the people at the end of the day, because we all know how politics have been monetized. But you see, I'm of the opinion that the direct primary and the consensus primary, if it is emplaced, will go a long way in actually giving the people the choice and the participation, if you will, to actually decide who their leaders should be. Because one, if it is a consensus, of course, before you can agree on a consensus, the infighting in the back end, inside the room, will have happened. People are saying, no, I want to do this, I want to run, you want to run. But at the end of the day, if it is better managed, and for the most part it's going to be better managed, because when you now see a political party saying that we have agreed on a consensus, that is not to say that people are 100% okay, but people are saying that in the interest of the larger group, in the interest of the Nigerian people, in the interest of their own members, some of them are going to step down their political admission. And that's why consensus is a good way to go in terms of actually developing this democracy that we have always been complaining that it has a small d. That's one. But again, the direct primary too, is very obvious. It is a way that members of the political party will be empowered, if you will, to choose their leaders. So in other words, when you are empowered, to choose your own political leaders and all of that, it gives you a sort of, for lack of a better word, it's sort of an opium kind of situation that, yes, I'm involved, as opposed to if an indirect primary has been practiced in a way, and you say, well, you know what, I wanted Mr. A. A lot of majority of us actually wanted Mr. A, but because Mr. A does not have money and Mr. B has a lot of money, then the ticket was given to Mr. B. What will happen? What will happen in that kind of thing? People are going to be discouraged. At the end of the day, people are not going to necessarily participate in the election proper. So, and when you begin to have a drawdown, if you will, of election that people are not participating, it doesn't augur well for democracy in the whole overall interest of the country.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm sure you want to take it on, but let's go to the next question,
yes,
and then you can write on it. Because I want us to touch this topic also, well. this dimension of what is happening. We see Kwakwanso, kind of flexing his muscle lately during the Ramadan ceremonies he had. He hosted Mr. Peter Obi, even Governor Sheyi Makinde with a few other people in Kano. And I'm told that it was a real massive turnout in Kano. Now, at the same time that is happening, of course, there are also insinuations that Kwakwanso may be coming to ADC, and if it does come to ADC, that's a big problem for Atiku Abubakar there. Now, I'll give you a scenario, and then Baba, you take it first. So it seems that some games are going on. There is the view that, look, if it's going to be consensus or direct primaries, Atiku seems to have the highest, representation in the party, not necessarily that is the best candidate, but because of the structure in the party, and then you see APC announcing that, it's going to be South, we are going to the South, and Dati Ahmed, the senator and founder of BASE, who was the vice presidential candidate of Peter Obi in 2023, saying that, hey, you know what, if ADC doesn't choose you, I'll make sure that something happens here in LP. So all of this is happening, So I wanted to ask you, Baba, can you give us the deeper, meanings? What in your own view, what all of this is about?
Okay, thank you very much. Quickly, in response to Chief Femi's comment, if we are running a democracy, we should run it full-blown. The discussion about consensus is true. But you will also agree with me, even in your party, the consensus is throwing up issues. We are having people saying we have been blocked from participation. I think the phrase that you were looking for was sense of belonging when you talk about the direct primaries. And that sense of belonging should be expanded. Let the parties decide how their primaries or their candidates emerge. If the party has the wrong strategy and goes for money and loses, as they say in Nigeria, Otong. If the strategy is wrong and they chose the wrong person, like I have advocated in 2023 that Atiku was the wrong choice for PDP, and I still stand by that. You can see how it had deteriorated and killed PDP.
Yeah.
Otong again. So my option is, I don't think the INEC or the electoral law, like I say, should handcuff the political parties. Let them fall on their sword.
Okay.
Now, coming to this, very interesting. By the way, as a son of Kano, I can tell you for free, the gathering in Kano for the Eid, the Eid gathering for Senator Rabiu Musa Konkoso was organic.
Where you hosted those guys?
Yes, it was organic. It was not a rented crowd. Of course, it goes without saying that as far as Kano politics is concerned, Senator Rabiu Musa Kwankwaso still towers and is not to be demystified. And that gathering, I think, is a demonstration of that fact. And we also hear subliminally a lot of activities are going in the back office that is really, really, beginning to give the APC in Kano sleepless night. Having said that, it still remains an unraveling situation, Prof, because the dynamics within the ADC you mentioned is another matter entirely.
Yeah.
The dynamics within the LP is another matter entirely. I said it in another media house, 2 months ago, that by 2023, ending of 2013, 2013, the coalition that came together to form the APC got their act together,
and people knew
2 clear years ahead of election.
Yeah, people knew where
they were heading, knew the zoning formula, and by 2014, 1.5 clear years later, I mean before election of 2015, they had in their kitty almost over 10 governors incumbent in their coalition. From the NPDP, the likes of Amechi, the likes of Kwankwaso that have moved into the coalition, and the likes of Oshomole and others that have moved into the... So they already had incumbent with the Ansaraki. And they had in the National Assembly already over 30% of the National Assembly, green and red chamber. So 1 year clearly ahead, their manifesto, their direction, their strategy, and they have begun to already entrench themselves into the system, even though in opposition party. Now this is very crucial for political strategy. Now we are going into the wee hours of election. We are already 3 months into 2026, sorry. So we have 9 months to the end of the year. We have less than 6 months for campaign to start. The party that...
Less than 1 month or so for primaries.
And the party that is considered the most formidable opposition party, because PDP is already gone, is still operating in the shadows. They just unraveled their manifesto. We are not even clear. Even the manifesto does not tell you where they are heading to. So what I'm saying is this. I think there's a lot of body movements that are exciting. But whether they will translate at the national level into the emergence of presidential candidate that will be really worth the while of competition for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu remains to be seen. But what is critical is politics is local. And as far as Kano politics is concerned, Kwankwaso is still on ground, and I think that is a cause for worry for the APC at the national level. But for the opposition party, so long as LP, ADC, all of them have different agendas, they will not be able to win the incumbent.
Okay, I mean, before I ask Mr. Odure to give us the last word, I want you to comment on what is quite a bit of serious speculation. Since you are from Kano,
yes,
we are hearing that Gawuna, who was the APC gubernatorial candidate in 2023, is beginning to, cavort with Kwankwaso. And that, the APC people, I mean, Mr. Odure, we have the last say, the APC people don't seem to be able to reach him. Is Kwankwaso making a move with Gawuna?
If you remember, in this very esteemed program, we discussed Kano politics, and I said it. When His Excellency Abba Kabir moved into the APC, and I said it's not yet game over, that the politics of Kano is highly, sophisticated, and that yes, even though at the national level, with profound respect, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, it looks like a settled matter. The political gladiators in Kano, it's not easy to assuage them that way. Go and settle yourself. The power blocks are deeply entrenched. And the political enmity is not going to just go away with a snap of a finger from Abuja. I told you. And I said, wait for the congresses.
You said it on this program.
I said, wait for the congresses. And I told you, the key political figures in Kano are not ready to be the political bomboy for the federal for the next 3 to 4 years. Because in Kano, it's not about the 2027 election. It's about what will happen to me and my people till 2031. And it's playing out. Now, if the game, which is a speculation, although very strongly so, we believe it's happening, is another game that Kwankwaso is trying to play. You pull Abba from me, I'm pulling Gawuna from you. And you see, to that extent, former Governor Ganduje actually dropped the ball because Gawuna, after a while, felt alienated.
And I think Ganduje is even discouraged, don't you think?
No, not discouraged. Ganduje is basically falling on his sword because before even the movement of Governor Abba to APC, Ganduje had lost full control of the APC structure in Kano. And I think that is why President Tinubu had to make that master stroke to see how he can reach out and make sure he has a hold in Kano, because you see, the Deputy Senate President was already breaking away from Ganduje. Another group is always breaking away in Kano. And then united, they stand, divided, they fall. Now, Gawuna had been, and remember, almost all the former political gubernatorial candidates became ministers, had key portfolios.
Right.
Gawuna was just left in the shadows. He wasn't made a minister. He was given to something in BUK and then later Federal Mortgage Bank as chair. So I believe it's an opportunity. And then make no mistake about it. Over time, Gawuna have built political structure and followership. So a combination of Gawuna's people and Kwankwas's people is a cause for worry for any local politician in Kano or anybody that wants to have a hold in the political structure of Kano. So it's a very interesting development. If that is the case, I believe Mr. President will not sit on his hand on this, because if it happens, it's going to disrupt the politics of Kano. Whether or not it's going to affect the federal, I think Mr. President, the way I see him, does not want to take chances. And if that is the case, this is a case he needs to handle as close as possible. The senatorial slot they want to offer him, Kano Central,
offer
Gawuna. Speculations are
that's from APC.
From APC. Mr. President, from what we hear, or APC, not say Mr. President, the offer is for him to get the senatorial slot for Kano Central, which is currently occupied by Senator Rufai Sanahanga, who is interestingly of the NNPP, and a diehard, adherent of Kwankwaso. Now, if that is the case, will he be able to win Rufai Sanahanga fair or square in Kano Central?
Without,
or will he be appeased with the senatorial slot?
Interesting.
The days ahead will be very interesting.
Very, very interesting. Last word to Mr. Femi Odere, on this matter, and I'll put a question, please feel free to conclude very quickly. Just let me frame the question, and then you can also make your comments. Is APC overseeing and supervising what seems to be some very questionable issues regarding the survival of democracy? And I'll give you a few examples. There's a lot of perception that there is political witch hunting going on. Perception. That's what it is. And then 32 governors now in APC. And then you are telling the parties, no, you can't do delegates conference. And then you are telling the parties, you have to come up with the list of your e-members in 1 month. People are beginning to say that, look, you guys want to kill democracy. Last word, Mr. Odere.
Let me take the question first, loudly, before I actually say one or two things to what Malam said. There is a method to what is going on. And I don't believe in any way, shape, or form that democracy is being killed by virtue of the governors actually coming to APC. These governors are not stupid. Nobody put any gun on their heads to come to APC. But I will wager loudly that what they have seen and what is the reality right now is the unprecedented achievement of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And remember when Olusegun Obasanjo was the president during the PDP period, I think they had about 31 governors at that time. Nobody cried any foul that the party was, that the country was going into a one-party system.
I think it's because, I'll let you finish, I'm sorry. I think it was partly because there was a reasonable opposition. Just please go ahead.
Yeah, but then, are we now saying that there is no reasonable opposition? If there is no reasonable opposition, let me say this, Laura. If there is no reasonable opposition, the APC is not going to be knocking on the politician. And please, we want opposition to come out and all of that. What are we talking about here? But you see, I don't believe. To me, it is a red herring. It is crying foul, where there's actually nothing to cry about. That the country is going into a one-party system. Because after all, I don't know the actual number of political parties that are right now, but I can wager that there are at least 15 to 20 political parties that are authentic, that are really recognized. So if we have authentic political parties that are multi-dimensional in their values, in their worldview, so why are we complaining that this is a one-party system? I think, in a nutshell, Lalu, people are just trying to call the dog a bad name in order to hang it, as far as APC is concerned. Okay. Now, going into the issue of Kwankwaso and all of that, I don't know why people do the same thing all over again and that they're expecting a different result. Kwankwaso may have garnered the so-called organic people in Kano. But what is playing now is actually what played out in 2023. If he decides to run, of course nobody is going to stop him from not running for president in 2027. But the result is still going to be the same as it was in 2023. Even if he decides to go to ADC, it's still going to be the same outcome. Yes. Because you know why? There's a groundswell of Nigerians that have said that this conventional wisdom of presidential rotation should be in place. Yes. And so if you
agree on this thing,
maybe I said the LP and ADC, they will not win the incumbent.
It is still going to be the same situation at the end of the day, because they are actually making the job of APC
easier.
To be easier. Okay. So that's what is going on here.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, because of our time. Of course, this is going to be a conversation that we're going to have in the coming months. Yes. One of the things that I find interesting is if Kwankwaso goes to ADC, then there's trouble for Atiku. Clearly, because you remember that in 2014, yes, Atiku was on the ticket at the APC primary, and guess who came second? Kwankwaso, beating Atiku to the top position.
And go back to the primaries of 2015 of the brand new coalition of APC. Who was first? Buhari was first. Who was second?
Let's just admit without conceding that Kwankwaso is going to get the ADC ticket. He's still going to get. He's only going to get Kano at the end of the day.
All right.
The same thing.
We see how it goes. Quite a very exciting conversation. Thank you so much, Malam Baba Yusuf, and also Mr. Femi Odere. Thank you for coming to us.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And there you have it, our nation of inside sources. Like we always say, Nigeria will prevail. It means Nigeria will win. Partly because we will talk about the important issues. Thank you for watching. My name is Laolu Akonde. And by the grace of God, I'll see you at the next edition.